There are 3 things that destroy relationships for men, and 98% of guys are doing these 3 things on a daily basis. Now, before I tell you what these 3 things are, you need to know why they actually happen. And instead of telling you some long, drawn-out story, it's better for you to understand the consequences of not fixing these things. Broken marriages, divorce, anxiety, depression, obesity, millions of dollars left on the table, and even suicide. All these things can be attributed to the 3 problems I'm about to share with you. And I guarantee you're doing at least one, if not all of them. So in today's podcast episode, I'm gonna break down what these 3 things are and how you can fix them today. The first problem is this: it's called victim mentality. It's playing the blame game in our relationships. I did this 7 years ago when my partner came home, looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't love you anymore." I blamed her for not communicating with me. I blamed her for not showing me or telling me what was going on. I blamed her for ending it abruptly and breaking my heart. So instead of taking any personal responsibility, I went on a 3-month bender. Drinking, smoking, taking drugs for 3 months in a state of depression, overwhelm, and anxiety, thinking of all the things she did wrong, thinking of all the things that she fucked up in the relationship. And as men, we do this so often with our wife, with our team, with our children. We blame other people for what we think and what we feel. We blame other people for how they're showing up in our relationships. Now, in reality, yes, people are fucked sometimes. You have women that cheat. You have children that don't respect you. You have a wife that might not provide you the things that you need in a relationship. These things happen. In our relationships, people have a role to play in how our relationships show up or how the quality of our relationship actually is. But what we tend to do as men is we play the blame game, blaming them for the lack of intimacy, blaming them for the lack of connection, blaming them for the lack of communication. And then when a marriage ends in divorce, which 52% of marriages end in divorce. First marriages, it's even higher for second marriages. So many men blame instead of seeing what's actually going on behind the scenes. If you've ever got into an argument with your wife or your partner, you'll know exactly what I mean. When we get into an argument, what we tend to do is we start yelling back and forth. We're both trying to prove a point and we both want to be heard. Then our partner says something and our response, either in our head or out loud, is, "You made me get angry. You made me upset. You made me insert problem here." This is a critical fucking error for modern day men, like especially high performing men. No one can make you anything. The only person who controls your thoughts, what goes on in your head, the language and stories, is you. The only person who controls your emotions and the feelings, whether it's anger, happiness, sadness, joy, frustration, calm, the feelings inside of your body, you choose them. Now, that person, whether it's your wife, a team member, a child, they can influence your feelings and thoughts, but they can't control them. What they said, if it's rude or obnoxious, if your wife says, "Fuck you," or "You're an asshole," or "You never, put us first," that will trigger you, and you're the one who decides what to do with the trigger. They have a role to play. Their words, their language, their tonality, their energy, it has a massive role to play. But as soon as it lands upon you, you as a modern day man are the only one who can control your reaction or your response. A good way to look at this is like a thermometer versus a thermostat. A thermometer goes up your ass, under your armpit, or under your tongue. Hopefully not in that order. Now that you got shit in your mouth or a fucking vision of that, a thermometer can only react to its environment. So if you put a thermometer in the ice cold Antarctic or you put a thermometer in a hot tub or jacuzzi, it's going to react based on the temperature. This is how most men live their lives. They react to the circumstances. Somebody doesn't perform at work, they react and start yelling. You come home, the house is a mess, you react because the environment isn't the way that you want it to be. This is a reactive way of living, which means you lose control of your thoughts, feelings, actions, and reactions. And then because you're the one who's lost control, you're able to blame other people. That takes some of the responsibility off you. It's like, it's not my fault that I reacted. It's not my fault that I feel this way. It's not my fault that I'm upset. It's the government's fault. It's my wife's fault. It's my children's fault. It's my team's fault that things aren't working. A thermostat goes on the wall, so not up your ass, hopefully. And a thermostat can influence the environment. It's hot and the thermostat can turn the temperature down. It's cold and the thermostat can turn the temperature up because it has control over the environment through its internal system. When you play the blame game, you blame other people for how you feel, for how you think, and it destroys relationships because you allocate the responsibility of the quality of your relationships to that person. So if it's your wife's responsibility or fault for the fact that you're angry, or that you're not having sex, or that you're not connected, then by definition, you can't fix it because they're the one holding the power. This is a massive problem. If you're playing the blame game, if you're stuck in victim mentality where it's somebody else's fault for the lack of results or connection in your relationships, then you are doomed to fucking fail. So how do you fix this problem if you know that you're a man that gets into victim mentality and plays the blame game? Well, the solution is simple. The opposite of blame and the opposite of victim is radical responsibility. It's taking ownership of your role in the situation. It's taking responsibility for your role in the relationship. That doesn't mean the other person doesn't have shit to work on. That doesn't mean that they don't have a role to play in the relationship. But you cannot control other people. The only thing you can control is your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your responses. Those are the 4 things we teach at Empowered Man that completely turn a man's life around. Because by definition, if you're in control of how you respond or react to a situation, if you're a thermostat, that means you get to decide and choose what direction you go in the relationship. There's some powerful questions you can ask yourself here to make this easier so that you can implement it with your wife or partner or with anyone else in your life. The first question to ask yourself is, what can I take responsibility for here? What can I take ownership for in this relationship? Do I yell? Do I get angry? Do I react? Do I come home stressed after a long workday? Do I drink too much? Am I less present than I was at the beginning of the relationship? Am I not communicating effectively? You look at yourself in the mirror, which is extremely hard to do because if you take radical responsibility and you take ownership in the relationship, it means that it's no one else's fault. It means that if your wife leaves you or if you get divorced, you are to blame here. She has a role to play, but you are responsible for it getting to that point. It means that if you aren't getting the output from your team in a business, that you're not leading them well. And it means if you're not getting respect from your children or they don't listen to you, that you haven't been the father they need to fucking respect. That's fucking hard to accept, is it not? It's hard to accept that when my partner left me 7 years ago, that I was not the fucking best man I could be. Because wives don't leave men who are valuable, who take ownership, and who show the fuck up. They don't, because there's not many of those men out there. It takes fucking balls. It takes courage to take radical responsibility in your relationships. If you're getting into arguments, what can you take ownership for? If you're not intimate or having enough sex, what can you take ownership for? I teach hundreds of men. We currently have 180 clients at the time of recording this. We've coached thousands and over 850 in our paid programs. And even I make this mistake sometimes. About a week ago, my wife and I hadn't had sex for 3 weeks. Now that's a long time for us. It's typically once or twice a week. So I start playing the blame game. I'm working a lot. I'm busy. She doesn't see how hard I'm working. I start going into victim mentality and I go, you know what? Like, she's not giving me what I want. It's not that difficult. 2 weeks in, I grab her thigh in the bed. She turns the other way. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I'm this, I'm that. I'm blaming her for the lack of intimacy. I was able to do some reflection, flip that on its head, take radical responsibility and remind myself that if my wife's not intimate, it means that I'm not giving her what she wants. How can I give her more love, appreciation, support, understanding, respect? So I take her out for our 7-year anniversary. I get a babysitter for our daughter. I help around the house. I communicate with her at the end of the day. I sit down and have dinner with her, look her in the eyes. Lo and behold, after 3 or 4 days of filling her cup, making deposits in her love bank, taking ownership of my role in the lack of sex, taking responsibility for how I could give her what she wants, guess what she gives me in return? 3 days in a row of getting laid, having sex. On the 3rd day, on the kitchen countertop, amazing, looking in the mirror while it happens. Great. That all came from taking radical responsibility. So what can I take ownership for here? What role did I play in this relationship? Have I communicated effectively? Have I communicated well? What was my tonality like? What was my energy like? We've all had the moment where we say to someone, can you do something? And they go, don't talk to me like that. And we get triggered and go, like what? We don't take ownership for our tonality in that situation. And then a question you can ask yourself as well for relationships is, have I set clear boundaries and expectations? In our business, we didn't onboard people properly. And then when they weren't doing their job or meeting their KPIs, I would get angry at them instead of realizing that it's my fault. Even though they have a role to play, I haven't led them effectively. So the blame game and victim mentality is fixed by taking radical responsibility. What can I take ownership for here? What role did I play? Have I communicated effectively? Am I the best version of myself? Am I showing up for these people? If you can answer that you've done all those things, then fuck yeah, blame that person. But until that point, you're wasting energy blaming them, which you can't control, when you could just control yourself, be that thermostat, and work on becoming the best you. This doesn't mean your wife or your partner, your employees, your kids can just get away with murder. It means you look in the mirror first before you judge them. You make sure that you've answered yes to all these questions and you become the best man you can fucking be. The second problem that destroys relationships is called negative focus. It's focusing on all the negative things. It might be some negative things or just being a fucking pessimist. Let me give you an example of how this happens to us as men. Have you ever done everything you can to try and support your partner? You might clean up the house, you might help with dinner, you might do the dishes, you go above and beyond to try and support that person. And then they come home or they walk into the room and the first thing they say, the first thing they do is they nitpick the one thing that you've missed. You left the fucking undies on the floor. You didn't do the dishes. You're meant to pick the kids up. They are completely blind. They're completely blind to all the things you've done, the intention you had to support, the energy and effort you put in. They ignore the fact that you worked all day. They ignore the fact that you're tired. They don't give a fuck about the fact that you've burnt out from working too much. And even though you feel that way, despite feeling that way, you went above and beyond to support. And the one thing they notice is what you haven't done. A big one, the toilet seat was left up. You didn't change the toilet paper roll. This has happened to so many men. We get nitpicked, but men do it too. We nitpick and we focus on the negatives in our relationships. With our team members, they're doing well in certain areas of the business, but what we'll tend to do is point out what they're not doing well. We don't acknowledge what they're doing well. We point out what they're not doing well, and we go into a state of judgment and unmet expectations. We do this in our relationships. Our wife is looking after the house. My wife, Rosie, she looks after our daughter, who's 2 years old this month in July 2023. She looks after her. There's always food in the fridge. The house is clean. She's got up every night for 2 years when our daughter cries. She's an amazing mother. But I've fallen into so many states because I'm stressed and I'm busy and I don't have enough time. I get into a default state where I focus on the one thing she hasn't done. Yeah, no, we haven't got laid in a week. Yeah, no, you haven't done this thing. And it's a default pattern for so many men. We focus on the things that have been done wrong. And because we're focused on that, we're now not focused on all the things that have been done right. Tony Robbins says where focus goes, energy flows. If I direct my focus like a lighthouse onto one area, everything else is left in darkness. So in your relationship, the question you get to ask yourself is, with my wife or partner, what are all the negatives I focus on? What are the things I focus on that I don't like? And what percentage of the time in your relationship with your wife or partner do you do this? In your business, what do you focus on? How much negativity do you focus on? What's being done wrong? What's not being done well? What's being done incorrectly? Same with your children. We focus on all these negatives, and what is that blinding you from seeing when it comes to positives? It's an extremely powerful question, and so many high performance men make this mistake. Because part of the reason we become successful, business owners, entrepreneurs, husbands, fathers, is that we perfect things. We are perfectionists. We're OCD. We love the business more than anyone else. We love working. We love what we do most of the time. So we want to make it as good as possible. But your wife or partner, they don't operate that way. Your employees, they don't operate that way. Because if they fucking did, they'd be running a business. It's so funny that we focus on the negatives, and then what we do is we judge people and we say negative things. We call them out on their bullshit. We say it with a negative tonality. We're a judgmental piece of shit or a prick, and then we wonder why they don't grow. It's because they don't feel like they're good enough and they don't feel like they're doing anything right when they're doing their fucking best. A good way to remind yourself of this is when you've done your best and somebody pointed out the one thing you did wrong. That's exactly how most of the people in our life feel when we nitpick and focus on the negatives in our relationships. Brother, if you're getting value from this podcast and you want to take your life to the next level, you want to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, and find work-life balance, then go to the link down below and book a coaching session with my team. On this session, we'll build out a roadmap for you on how to have the wealth, the health, and relationships you deserve, on how to be a better husband, a better father, and a better man. So whether it's taking your business to the next level, fixing your relationship or taking that to the next level, if you know you could be better, go and book a coaching session with our team and we'll build out a custom roadmap for you. Just use the first link in the description. So how the fuck do you fix this? Because so many of us are negative. My father was like this. I love him to bits. He might even watch this, but for so many years of his life, he was a victim who focused on problems instead of solutions. He was negative as fuck, and he sometimes still is to this day. Why? Because he wasn't aware. Awareness is the first step to change. Just acknowledge all the things in your life that you focus on that are negative. Think about it. It's not just in your relationships. Do you focus on how you've always got to pay bills and you can't find good stuff and no one really cares and it's too hard and I can't do this and I don't have enough time, and all these things are negative, and every single second you spend focusing on the negatives in your life or in your relationships, every single second, every single minute, every single hour is time and energy and effort you could be redirecting to positivity, focus, and getting what you want. Think about it. If you're focusing on what you don't want, the negatives, on the other side of that is what you do want, the positives. If you don't have enough money and you focus on you don't have enough money, you just redirect that focus on how can I make more money? If your relationship's shit and you're arguing too much, and you're focusing on how this always happens, redirect your focus to how can I fix it? How can I communicate better? The first step is acknowledgement. We call it the power focus here at The Empowered Man. What can you focus on when you're negative? What are the things you're focusing on that are negative? And what can you focus on that's the opposite of that negative thing? Acknowledgement of what's negative, and then awareness of the opposite. What's the thing that gives you power? When it comes to your relationships, instead of focusing on what's being done wrong, what are they doing well? What are they doing right? How are they meeting your needs? When are the moments where they're giving you love, appreciation, support, understanding, and respect? What are the things you love about that person instead of the things you don't? What are the things that you can improve instead of the things that aren't working? Focusing, it's literally as simple as turning in a certain direction. I'm focusing on these negatives. I'm judging, I'm expecting things from people. How can I focus on the positives? My team member isn't performing. Instead of being judgmental and focusing on the fact they're not performing, I go to that relationship and say, hey man, how can we support you in becoming better? What can we do to make your life easier? How can I give you some tools to make your life easier? My wife and I are arguing too much. I sit down with her and say, hey babe, I've been focusing on how much we're disconnected. I'd like to be a better communicator. Focus on the positives. It sounds so simple. Where focus goes, energy flows, and you decide what you focus on. You decide the language in your head. You decide the stories up here. You decide. So let's say you come home, the house is a mess. The story and the language and the perspective and the focus is, my wife doesn't care. She doesn't respect me. The house is a mess. The kids are all over me. I never get time to myself. You acknowledge it. Fuck, I'm doing that thing again. I'm being a negative, judgmental prick. You acknowledge it, you flip it on its head. Come through the door, you acknowledge it. Shit, I'm doing that thing again. I'm so lucky to have a home. I'm so grateful that I have healthy children. I'm so glad my wife hasn't left yet. And you shift that perspective by shifting the stories and shifting the language. What is being done well in your relationships? What can you acknowledge about your partner? My wife made meatballs a few days ago, and she's made meatballs a lot recently. Since we had a child, she's become a housewife, and I'm so grateful for that. I wasn't initially. She made meatballs a few days ago, and I was eating them after a long day. I just looked her in the eye and said, these are the best fucking meatballs you've ever made. And I just saw her face light up. I saw her energy light up because I acknowledged her. I do this with my team members. I sent them a Loom video this morning, and I wasn't able to make the meeting because I'm recording on Fridays. One of my other team members ran the meeting, and I sent them a Loom video, a video recording saying, hey guys, just want to acknowledge all of you. Like, you guys are fucking crushing it at the moment. You guys are showing up. You're doing the work. It's seen. I see you. I appreciate you. Acknowledge the positives. Acknowledge what's going well. It doesn't mean you ignore the negatives, but you acknowledge the negatives and you reframe them to positives, because every single moment you focus on the negatives is a waste of time to get you further away from what you want, which is relationships full of love, connection, and abundance. So focus on the positives. We call it the power focus. The third problem that destroys relationships for men is not communicating. Sounds crazy, right? Not communicating, not sharing what's on your mind, not asking your partner how they're feeling, not getting to know your team or getting to know your loved ones. It sounds so fucking simple. Not communicating. Men are terrible at communication. And the ironic thing is, you might be a great communicator in your business or with team members, but a terrible communicator at home. We've coached clients who have over 50 employees, 100 employees, make $50 to $100 million a year, and they can communicate with all those employees, lead a massive team, but when they come home, they get into arguments with their wife, or they don't know how to lead their children. This all comes down to this one skill set, which is communication. Now, I've shared in the past before that communication is the key to connection, and the leading cause of divorce is a breakdown in communication. This is in every area of our lives. We have a client that's worked with us for over a year. He's invested 15, 20 grand into some of our programs, skyrocketed his results. He lost weight, his relationship got better, his business improved, he started implementing systems, and for 6 months of our mastermind program, he was absolutely crushing it. Then what happened was he came to a few of our coaching sessions and he felt like he wasn't getting the value. So he didn't communicate that with us. He didn't tell us that he wanted more value or that he wasn't getting what he wanted. And we got on calls with him. We messaged him back and forth. There were moments to communicate it. We asked him how he was doing. He said, I'm fine. Everything's good. And then we started hearing less and less from him. There was a period of 3 months in the last 3 months where we heard nothing from him. He wasn't picking up phone calls. He wasn't responding to SMSs. And his time in our program ran out. So we removed him from our program because he wasn't responding to anything. And he sent a very angry message via SMS saying, you kicked me out, you got rid of me, it's not good enough, it's not professional, I wasn't getting the value. So finally I got a response from him. Instantly I booked a call. I said, thanks so much for getting back to me, man. And we got on a call together and I found out his stories that he wasn't getting the value. He felt like that for 6 months. He wasn't happy. He felt like things had changed. My simple question to him was, well, how long have you been feeling this way? 6 months. And what stopped you from communicating it? He admitted in his own language. He said, I'm a people pleaser. I didn't want to upset you. I didn't want to not be liked. I avoided it. And I said to the guy, I can't give you what you want unless you communicate it with me. So many men struggle with this. They're people pleasers. They avoid having difficult conversations with their partner, even though they know the relationship isn't working. If you know there's arguments, there's disconnection, there's not enough intimacy, you feel like roommates instead of soulmates, you don't see eye to eye on things, you're at each other's throats, you know there's a problem, but how many men actually communicate about it? Men are terrified of going to counseling or therapy. Now, I've created videos on this. I think for most men, they're a waste of time because there's not that many good counselors or therapists. We help men in 8 weeks or less fix their marriage, but they're terrified to go and talk about it because men struggle to talk. You have two types. You have people pleasers who don't want to hurt someone or don't want to not be liked by someone. And then you have avoidance men who avoid the pain of having a difficult conversation because it's painful. That's a fucking fact. It's painful to ask your wife, hey, what could I do better in the relationship? And she goes, oh, I don't know. And you go, no, tell me. And she tells you that she's not happy, the sex is shit, you're not a very good partner. That's hard to hear. That takes a lot of responsibility. It's easier to just pretend like it's her fault. It takes responsibility and ownership to have a difficult conversation with your team and say, how could I be a better boss? How could I be a better leader? What am I not doing well here? That takes a lot of fucking courage because you're going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to get a front stab. You can backstab someone or you can front stab. And a front stab is not done behind your back. It's done directly to your face and it fucking hurts. But it's the best way to grow. If you're not communicating in your relationships, you're typically doing that because you're avoiding pain. There's now pain and there's later pain. There is the pain of having a difficult conversation. There is the pain of learning some things you might be afraid of hearing. There is the pain of potentially hearing that your wife's not happy or she doesn't love you. But there's also the later pain of delaying that conversation. And the longer you avoid communication and difficult conversations, the more that thing will fester and the more that thing will grow. The pain will get greater and greater and greater. I'll give you 2 examples of this. Do you ever have exams in high school or assignments to hand in when you were in school, however many years ago that was? Now, I would always tell myself that I was going to complete the assignment as soon as I got it. Then I'd go for 2 months without touching the assignment. And like most men, maybe you can relate, at the end of the 2 months, right before I had to hand the assignment in, I'd cram it all into an all-nighter, I'd work on it all night, and I'd get it done overnight, and then I'd hand it in. And I'd get like a average to above average score. Now, I had 2 months of thinking about that assignment. I have 2 months of that thing festering inside of me. It's always in the back of your mind. And it just wasn't. It's exactly what happened to our client who avoided having that difficult conversation with. The second example here is from one of our clients who was tasked with having a difficult conversation with his wife. And I basically said to him, ask your wife if she's happy. Ask your wife if she wants you to change, if she wants you to do things differently. And his response was, I'm afraid of the answer I'll get. His fear was that his wife would say she didn't love him anymore and she wanted a divorce. Now, what I explained to the guy, which a lot of us, it just goes over our heads, was if that's what she's going to say, it means it already exists. You just haven't searched for it. If she feels like she wants a divorce and she's going to leave and you avoid asking her because you're afraid she's going to say that, then she's going to do it in a month or a year or 2 years and you'll never get that time back. But we don't think about this. We think about the pain of communicating now and we avoid the later pain, which is a fucking fatal error. We lie blatantly about things. We keep things from our partner, from our team. We always cause more pain when we do this. So if you struggle to have difficult conversations, understand that this is a massive cause of divorce, and this is why so many relationships are destroyed for men. So how the fuck do you fix this one? If you're a people pleaser, if you avoid difficult conversations, if you get angry and triggered and yell in relationships, if you struggle to stay calm and in control, if you're not the best communicator you could be in your relationships, and you know that's going to cause pain in the future, how do you fix it? Well, the first step is just acknowledging that you're not a master communicator. And the solution is to make a commitment to become a master communicator. I made this commitment 7 years ago when my relationship ended. I decided that I would never let this happen again. There will never be another woman that leaves me without me realizing what's going on, because I'm going to communicate how she's feeling, what she's thinking, and vice versa. You got to remember that in life, hard conversations create an easy life, and easy conversations create a hard life. I'm going to repeat that one more time so it lands. Write this shit down, tattoo it, put it somewhere where you're going to read it every single day. Hard conversations, easy life. Easy conversations, hard life. What this means is that you're gonna have hard conversations, and that's okay. If they're hard, it's not necessarily that they're difficult, it's the fact that you haven't fucking practiced them. Practice the hard conversations with your wife, with your children. Share what's going on for you. Ask them better questions. Find out how they would describe you. One of the best ways to become a great communicator is to ask the people in your life, the relationships that you have, how they would describe you in 5 words. Just say to them, say to your wife, I want you to be brutally honest. What are the first 5 words that come through your mind when you think about me? Ask your children, ask your employees or team members, and you might be shocked what you're going to hear. If you hear words that you're not happy with or words that hurt you, great! Take radical responsibility, take ownership, and focus on how you can go into a place of power. How can you change that? If you hear words you love, even better. Learning how to be a master communicator will suck. You'll suck a lot of dicks. It's difficult. It's like going to the gym. You start off weak, but as you go, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. You build muscle, you lift more weight, you put more reps and weight on the bar. But over time, you build this muscle. It's a skill set of communicating, of having difficult conversations, of being able to share what's working and what's not working. And this shortens the feedback loop. It means that it's not festering. As soon as a negative thing happens in your relationship, you resolve it and deal with it right away. I do this with my wife, Rosie, all the time. Sometimes we still get into small arguments. We get into disagreements. She's tired. She's stressed. I've had a long day. We snap at each other. It's okay. It's so normal to get triggered. It's normal to react. What's not normal is to let it go on and go to bed without talking about it. So after 10, 20 minutes, maybe an hour, once we've both cooled off, we'll come together. One of us will do it or both of us will do it. And I'll say, I'm sorry for talking to you that way. I'll communicate that it wasn't okay. I'll communicate the story that came up for me. I'll communicate that I feel ashamed. I'll communicate that I feel like she could have communicated better. We will share these things calmly and patiently, and we'll communicate and have that difficult conversation so that we can grow together. It's not normal in relationships to have the same arguments and the same problems over and over and over again. That means that you're not communicating and you're not learning from the experience. You're allowed to have negative experiences, but you want to learn from them, you want to grow from them, and that all comes down to having difficult conversations and becoming a master communicator. And there's only one way to get good at that. It's to practice. It's to do the hard shit. So let's tie this all together because this is fucking powerful stuff. This has saved my marriage with my current wife after losing my previous relationship 7 years ago. This has allowed me to make millions of dollars. It allows me to have a team in my business where they respect me and they want to work with me. I had a team member say on an interview for a potential new hire that he would do anything for me and this business. It's allowed me to have intimacy and sex with my wife. It allows me to lead my daughter and teach her how to be positive and happy and find solutions to problems. It all comes down to fixing these 4 things. So let's recap them. Problem number 1 is victim mentality and the blame game. Where in your life are you showing up as a victim? Where are you blaming other people for your lack of results? For your lack of connection? Where are you blaming someone for how you feel? Blaming them for the thoughts going through your head, blaming the government, blaming your partner, blaming your team. The blame game and the victim mentality must be eradicated. And the way you do that is by taking radical responsibility, taking ownership of your role in your relationships. It doesn't mean they don't have a role to play, but you can't control them. You can only control you. The second problem, the second thing that destroys relationships for men is negative focus. Being depressed, anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, focusing on the negatives instead of the positives. Nitpicking the relationships in your life, pointing out what they're doing wrong or what they could do better or what's not right. You flip this on its head and you go into the power focus. You focus on solutions. What are they doing well? What can you acknowledge? What can you be grateful for? Bring awareness to the negative focus and switch it into the power focus, and you'll become the most positive, empowered man in the room, someone that people love being around. And the third key problem is a lack of communication. It's avoiding difficult conversations. It's forgetting that if you delay and let things fester, you'll create more pain in the future. The avoidance of now pain creates later pain. And the way that you fix this is you push hard and have those difficult conversations. You build the skill set. It's gonna suck. And despite it sucking, as a committed man, as a leader, as a modern day king, as a fucking weapon, you do hard shit. You push for hard shit and you get better and better and better at communicating, understanding people, delivering a message, receiving a message, not reacting. Communication is the key to connection. When you fix these 3 things, your relationships skyrocket. In your health, in your wealth, in your relationships, everything gets better. Your business, your marriage, being a father, being a modern day man. But you got to commit to fixing these 3 things. So I hope you got some value from this podcast. If you did, then please give it a thumbs up on YouTube or 5 stars on the podcast platform. Feel free to drop a comment down below and let me know what you'd like support with in your health, wealth, and relationships. And if you want to learn more about communication and how you can become a master communicator, I'm going to drop a video up the top here where you can watch a podcast on exactly how you can become an elite communicator and have the best relationships in the world. So I hope you got some value. Go and watch that video right now. Brother, if you're getting value from this podcast and you want to take your life to the next level, you want to fix your marriage, reconnect with your children, and find work-life balance, then go to the link down below and book a coaching session with my team. On this session, we'll build out a roadmap for you on how to have the wealth, the health, and relationships you deserve, on how to be a better husband, a better father, and a better man. So whether it's taking your business to the next level, fixing your relationship, or taking that to the next level, if you know you could be better, go and book a coaching session with our team and we'll build out a custom roadmap for you. Just use the first link in the description.